you start doing that in the billions of dollars. We have several customers that put more than $6 billion on our platform, and you start saving 10 to 20%. Sam, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars here. I mean, this is an incredible use case for AI. So we started with the story about 8 years ago, and now the time is here. It's the perfect storm, Sam. You think about what we talked about, what CFOs care about now, cost containment strategies.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's show. And if you're joining for the first time, this is a new live series that we are conducting. We used to have a lot of different podcasts. We have roughly 600 episodes right now on WBS Rocks, but we are changing the format. We are doing it live now. So from now on, we are going to meet every Thursday or Friday, somewhere closer to 8 a.m. Eastern. Sometimes that could be slightly later as we have today, because the guest that we have today, he is in a different time zone in Pacific. So we are trying to accommodate that, but you can expect that we are probably going to be somewhere closer to this. So for today, we have a guest, and Seth, and I'm not going to attempt to pronounce your last name. I'll let you do that. From Globality is the company. So we are going to have a lot of fun talking about AI, which is the hot topic in the market. And when you combine that with sourcing, that's going to be super interesting. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Seth. Do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Sam. Sam, you rock, by the way. WBS rocks, you rock. I really appreciate being on your podcast and talking to you a little bit about. And this is fun. We're doing it live, right? So let me tell you a little bit about my background for the audience. My name is Seth Catalli. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of Globality. Yes, I'm in the West Coast time zone. I actually grew up in Silicon Valley, and I'm that kid that kind of grew up doing a paper route. Always worked. Bought myself a computer when the first computers were still just coming out. I think I had an Apple IIe at school, so I went out and bought a Commodore 64. For those of you that remember that, taught myself some basic programming. Went to school to be an engineer, and when I started my career, I really started as like a sales engineer. And now I find myself in leadership, and I did come up through, sales. And sales is a people occupation, right? So my priorities are really clear. I believe in human potential. I'm inspired every day by, the idea that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things. So I champion human potential so that people can show up as their authentic whole selves every day. And then there's a lot in sales around execution. And as a leader, you think about, how do you create teams that are always improving? And how do we really understand a big enough why so that when things are difficult and friction's high, we can bring a real sense of clarity of what we're trying to accomplish. So that's just a little bit about, what drives me personally. Career-wise, I really had three phases, Sam. I grew up in analytics early in my career, and that really taught me, what you want to measure and why. Really drive into business outcomes. I worked at companies like Cognos and Hyperion in those early years. And we really were moving from departmental value for analytics to enterprise-wide value. The second phase of my career was more around operational excellence, and that was in the ERP world. So I worked at Oracle, I worked at SAP, and I was fortunate enough to join Workday in the early days pre-IPO and go through their IPO and help drive their business. And then my third phase of my career, if you will, has been really around automation and automation, but also AI. Started with UiPath, went through a nice run with them when they just were early, and then through an amazing growth run through their IPO as well. So was able to help drive some of their strategy around customer and strategic engagements. And we We did a lot around how to run autonomous operations. And that led me to Globality, because Globality really takes that idea of autonomous operations right into spend management and using AI to drive cost savings and efficiency in the world of sourcing.
Okay, so very interesting background. I love talking to sales engineers. They have the best of a lot of different worlds, and that's where my personal passion is, to really dig into all of those topics. And one of the points that you mentioned related to why I think WBS Talks is really known for why we really like to go deep into these topics. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So before we dig into the stories, and I know that you have a lot of stories, if you are in the audience and we would love to know where you are joining from. If you guys have any sort of questions, please comment them so that we can attack those during the episode. Our preference always is going to be to answer your questions first. If you have anything that you would like to learn, otherwise, obviously, we'll go with our agenda. So the next question that I'm going to have for you, Seth, is, as you know, the theme of this podcast is business growth. And we are looking to see, what's your perspective on business growth?
Sam, when we think about growth, we're at a very particular moment in time. It's profitable growth now, right? It used to be growth at all costs, but now if you think about every CFO and what they're looking for right now is they are putting cost containment programs into place, because why? They're being rewarded for those programs. And what they're doing is they're saying, what part of our organizations can we drive cost out, contain cost, but why? Because we want to capture that and we want to invest it in growth. And so they want to invest it in the areas of growth that are profitable. You think about things like the rule of 40 from a financial standpoint, Sam, that companies are being measured by. All of the metrics right now around growth are how do you grow in the right areas strategically. And what I see is finance leaders are under pressure from their CEOs and boards to find new levers where every dollar that the company spend can help drive growth and deliver better business outcomes. And so on one side, you're hearing all about, growth in a profitable way. And on the other side, of course, every CFO in their personal life has been looking at how generative AI has come in and being used from everything from creating people are using to create their wedding vows now, right?
Yeah.
People are using it as just a consumer technology. Yet at the enterprise level, boards and CEOs are being asked to find tangible use cases for generative AI to reduce cost and improve productivity and efficiency. We see that in our personal lives. Why can't we do that at an enterprise level? And automated spend management does just that. So if you're looking at cost containment programs for growth, and if you're looking at how to use generative AI, and procurement comes to the top of that, spend management comes to the top of that, priority. Globality is right in the middle of that and driving that.
Okay, very interesting. So honestly speaking, when we look at AI, and I'm completely fascinated right now, the number of use cases that we are seeing. And I have a recollection based on, and I don't know, Seth, whether you followed the whole story about the legalization of cannabis in Canada. When that happened, investors were literally pouring money that, okay, guys, go and spend this money somewhere, please. Okay, that's the state that AI is in right now, that people are really willing to invest because they feel that they are going to get something out of it, which is a good state, but it could be concerning state as well, right? Depending upon what they are going to get. So at this one of time, it is more in the experimentation stage. And obviously in the sourcing procurement world, we have seen a lot of AI already. Like there are many different companies, they are trying to attack many different scenarios. So one thing, number one, what's your take on AI in your space in terms of what problems you are trying to solve? And my take on this is going to be, why do you feel confident that there's going to be a tangible business value for investors as well as for the customers?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I just start by listening to the market, listen to CEOs, what they're talking about, CFOs, what they're focused on. I can just think of a very recent interview with one of our customer CEOs, T. Rowe Price CEO Rob Sharp. He recently told the Financial Times there are a range of priorities and around generative AI, right? And he talked about driving, this is interesting, content creation for proposal writing for RFPs. It's something you might not think of. You might not think of that as like the first place for AI. But it's taking this broader concept of AI and saying, where can we really have an impact? And a very simple idea, of course, is using generative AI to help remove the friction from creating a competitive environment for how you use your spend. And right at the heart of that is this, as the CEO of T. Rowe Price said, Rob Sharp's, content creation for proposal writings for RFPs. We've got some opportunities in general that, as the quote goes, that I really think will help us be more efficient and streamline some processes. Interesting, right? So if you start to kind of, what I think we should do, Sam, is like pull back to the different layers of onion behind that, right? Because it's a simple idea, but to do it actually is quite complex. And I think about, if you and I, Sam, if it was 8 years ago and we were going to try to tackle some problems, business problems that we felt like we could have a low to medium investment but have really high yield with AI. It mirrors what basically our founders did at Globality. And they said, where can we really seize the opportunity for AI that's coming? And what they did is they said, let's look at this area of spend. There's a very high volume of spend within companies. If you think about every dollar that comes in to a company, you end up spending, let's say, 90 cents of it, and you either do that in COGS or SG&A. You do that in direct material purchases. If you manufacture something, you do that in indirect. And actually, this area of indirect, that term, it ends up being on average 20 to 40% of a company's revenue. And so there's a large volume. Secondly, with the kind of spend that we're talking about, this kind of indirect spend that goes across the whole organization, just by its very nature, there's tens of thousands of stakeholders in that. The people who are trying to get to their business outcome by bringing in a third party or expressing their priorities through their spend. So not only is there a big volume of dollars in this area, there's also a really wide variety of people that are involved with that have different skill sets and different interests of being how involved they want to be and how deep they want to be involved in actually going out and creating a competitive environment for that spend. The third thing I would say, Sam, is you've got, by its very nature, this type of spend cuts across the whole enterprise and it's got tens of thousands of diverse suppliers all over the world. I mean, some of the larger companies, larger enterprises will have 50, 60,000 different suppliers. So if you think like a business problem that you'd like to solve with AI and certainly with automation, you go big volume of spend, lots of different people involved with that, and then a very broad, diverse set of suppliers. It turns out that companies who are applying AI into that particular business problem with Globality are saving from 10 to 20% on their individual projects. And you start to roll that up. We're talking about billions of dollars of spend that they're putting on the Globality platform, but they're really driving AI into their decision-making process of how they spend money and autonomously sourcing anything, triaging spend and creating these like journeys. We create these journeys depending on the sourcing scenario, all the way from tail spend, really small, maybe tactical spend, up in goods and services, all the way up to big strategic multi-million-dollar projects. And you start doing that in the billions of dollars. We have several customers that put more than $6 billion on our platform. And you start saving 10 to 20% Sam, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars here. I mean, this is an incredible use case for AI. So we started with the story about 8 years ago, and now the time is here. It's the perfect storm, Sam. You think about what we talked about, what CFOs care about now, cost containment strategies. And we know that AI is coming into the enterprise and looking for tangible ways to provide efficiency. Those two things come together. And this is $100 million opportunity for CFOs.
Yeah, so very interesting layers there and perspective. So I'm going to touch on some of those topics because I'm sort of coming the blank slate here, to be completely honest, okay? Because I did not have any familiarity with globality. So obviously, some of my questions are going to be naive, and that's probably going to be for our listeners as well. I don't know how much they understand the company as well as the platform. So they are probably going to have very similar questions as well. So one of the use cases that you mentioned related to RFP, which is a very interesting use case, obviously, right? But when you get to the depth of it, when I look at sourcing function, okay,
Yeah.
Sourcing function is, I call it labor of love. And that is the term they use in retail as well, because it's a lot of hard work. Okay. It's very comparable to your recruiting because you are sourcing these vendors. You have the recruitment process. And I don't know how much they are going to be appreciated, to be completely honest. Okay. Yes, some companies are going to appreciate them a lot, but definitely they are not going to have the same appreciation as salespeople. I guarantee this, right? Just because the way organizations are structured, the way their cost is structured. So obviously that's where your automation can play a big role. AI can play a big role. So in this particular case, when you look at RFP scenario, I can see the use case for generative AI. And the other layer that we have in this is generative AI versus some of the scenarios that were more of the prescriptive AI, which was already there. There were a lot of companies that were doing a lot of work in that space. So I don't know how that is going to factor in, where generative AI is going to play the role, where the real prescriptive AI that is going to help with the decision making, data analysis, automatic recommendation, I guess.
It's funny. We do have a customer who recently was just speaking, and they said they call globality the magic button.
Okay, perfect. I like it. Yeah. So you wanna start on the story, I guess, or attack this question if you like.
Yeah.
Generative AI versus the prescriptive AI that I mentioned, and how
generative AI versus specific AI.
Prescriptive AI.
Prescriptive AI.
Yeah, because before generative AI was there in the market, there was a lot of work that was done in the AI space, but generative AI is producing the content, right? So it has very different use cases. But when you look at this more from the data perspective, analysis perspective, it was slightly different, right? When you look at the prescriptive AI. So that's where I see a lot more use cases for sourcing function, the way sourcing function is structured. But if you are seeing anything else, maybe talk about that, or maybe a story, I guess.
Well, you're exactly right. And as we just talked about, the AI that we use, we started building 8 years ago. So of course, generative AI came out in the last 18 months. So there's a number of different AI elements that go into this business process that we're talking about. So you're right to bring that up. And just to be clear, though, just to because many in the audience probably haven't focused on sourcing. Let me just clearly state, Globality's autonomous sourcing platform is powered by Glow. It's a cutting edge procurement AI agent, right? We have AI agents that we're seeing now in all different areas of the business, right? Well, kind of famously in development, right? In programming, we talk about AI agents, but really across the organization. The procurement AI agent, Glow, that we provide helps to navigate the complexity of enterprise procurement. It captures all the demand from, again, tens of thousands of stakeholders to support all sourcing modes, from procurement-led to procurement-assisted to business self-service. And then you brought up an interesting thing. You talked about HR and recruiting. I think that was really smart, Sam, because what you're doing is you're saying, we've seen this story before a little bit, especially when you start thinking about things that used to be back office functions that are now either shared between the back office, really scaling through more self-service, or really it gets to a mode where you've empowered the business end user to drive the process, right? And there's a lot of efficiency in that. And we have done that in HR. You brought up the HR example. If you think about a lot of HR processes that have gone through, I would say, a transformation in the last 10 years, you start to think not only about recruiting, but think about the idea of performance management.
Yeah.
Think about the ideas of a performance management that used to be run by HR, but today you use software. And as the manager closest to your staff, you are inputting, in like the 9 box, for example, where your staff lies. And then based on that, behind the scene, there's a bunch of rules, there's a bunch of HR policy. And in a later date, based on that input, you would do things like, for example, some award, an annual process for how you would award your different employees. But then again, that's self-service. The rules and the amount of award that you can give or the amount of raise that you can give is all built into the system. And so the rules that HR put in place become almost like invisible to the end user, and the end user is just getting things accomplished throughout the year that make the most sense. We can make a very similar operating model analogy to the world of spend management and the world of sourcing. People just want to buy, right? They want to buy the things that help move their business outcomes forward. And speed becomes super important to a business end user. And if they feel like they're being slowed down by some back office process or policy, frustration sets in really quickly. I think we've all probably can identify with that. It's probably happened to each of us, right? And so what we're doing with procurement is really allowing them to scale all the great work that they've done over the last 10 years to create, for example, really smart policies about creating a fair process, about what kind of values that the company has around working in an ESG type environment. How do you help small businesses, local businesses, women-owned businesses participate more in the global economy? And you think about from a self-service standpoint is, how do I quickly understand who the best vendor is for me that I want to partner with? And how can I do that in a way where I have the information at my fingertips and I can drive that process forward with procurement policies that I'm following? We also see this, right, just in travel, right, where when you book travel, you know that you're following you use the company's portal, you know that you're following the company's policies, but you're just booking travel. You're just thinking the outcome that you want to do. But let's do that now in that same way across, a $20 million strategic project that, is a board level initiative. So you asked a question, Sam, about AI, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how Globality uses AI to power this new way forward. So one thing that we did is we have proprietary data that's specific to procurement. We built a knowledge graph that allows for vast combinations of business needs into manageable sourcing events. We understand 7,000 plus, level 5 sourcing, level 5 spend elements, similar to like a taxonomy.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's just one piece of AI, which makes this entirely different process possible. There are others I can walk you through, Sam.
Yeah, so very interesting. So all of these layers are very interesting, but my personal favorite is always, one of these stories. And I know that you had roughly 2 stories that you wanted to hit on. So I don't know if you're going to have time for those, but maybe let's start with the first story. Okay. So here's what I personally like about this story, to be completely honest. Okay. So if you can provide the background of the company, what was the original problem, how they started on this journey. Obviously, they must have some sort of problem, deep pain, why they wanted to explore something like Globality, right? Provide in terms of the size, how the organization was structured, who was engaged from the sales cycle perspective, who was in deep pain, how many people were involved in the sales cycle, and then finally any twists or turns that you might be able to provide as they went through the journey of this platform.
Sure. Yeah. Let's do that. Thanks for asking. I'd like to talk about one of Europe's largest technology companies, BT, British Telecom. And the reason I'm going to start with a story about BT is really, again, we're talking about AI, and we're talking about it rising to the level of board level, CEO level, CFO level initiatives. And I'll just start by just saying, when BT released their annual report last year, in the annual report, BT calls out, we deployed Globality's AI-powered platform for sourcing across a range of business areas. We're working with Globality's scope requirements more precisely, find suppliers in real time, compare proposals, and make better data-driven buying decisions. Our buyers have placed hundreds of projects on the Globality platform, and BT Sourced used it to automate administrative heavy tasks, cutting go-to-market time for typical sourcing projects to 3 to 4 days. Right? So you can think about saying like times in the past where we've done RFPs and went out and tried to find like a bunch of suppliers. We actually might get a consultant just to help us build our requirements, right?
Yeah.
Well, now you have an AI agent that can do that, and things that might have took us months, 6 months to get a project from idea to actually kicked off,
Yeah.
can happen in days, right? And so that's the BT story is partially about that speed, that speed to driving the business outcome. I mean, the issue really is about getting a better handle on, your project spend and buying goods and services that the organization needs to operate at massive enterprise level, right? We're talking billions of pounds here.
Yeah.
And we actually have a recent podcast that I hosted called the Spin Sessions, and with their chief procurement officer and CEO of BT Sourced, Cyril Parat. He details in that how autonomous sourcing technologies have achieved great benefits in the last 2 years. BT Group is reaping that 10% plus savings that we talked about at the top of the conversation on its indirect spend, and consistently delivering that to the bottom line. His teams now use Globality Autonomous Sourcing platform to manage 2/3 of BT's overall $13 billion in annual spend. And he hopes to increase this percentage to over 100% in the not too distant future. So what are we really doing? It's AI-enabled sourcing.
Yeah.
And it's using generative AI, as well as other types of AI, like we just talked about, natural language process that extracts complex intent around the need from business users. So business users just type in their needs in plain English, and then we build smart requirements around that. Another thing that people do is they upload documents, for example, that are artifacts of the project they want to do. And quite frankly, even when people are having Zoom calls now, you can just get the recordings from that, right? The transcripts, and you can upload that. And so the AI agent Glow is able to use what people type in, as well as events from other systems, as well as these documents, to put together the requirements in just a matter of minutes. Tesco says this has gone down to under an hour for them. To give you an example of another customer. But what our customer is doing, in this case BT, is they're using this AI-powered category expertise to ensure cost levers are there for each particular category of spend, whether it's direct spend, indirect spend, or transactional type spend. And so what we have is this multidimensional algorithm that matches the needs of all these individual business users to a truly unique, qualified supplier. And now that supplier has an AI matching, but there's one other thing, Sam. We're also using the knowledge of all the other people in your organization who have actually worked with that supplier. So you get this crowdsourced feedback in interactions, which feeds the learning as well to offer smart predictions around who should your supplier be for this, and where have others in your organization already have ratings on those suppliers, and so that goes into the algorithm for matching as well.
Yeah, so very interesting story. So we have one of the comments from the audience, so we definitely want to touch on that. But if you guys have any other stories in the audience, I mean, we would love to hear those as well. If you have seen very similar stories in your space and whatever you have done to solve them, we would like to know those, and we would love to cover those as well. But the question that Ari has is, without good master data, the AI will fail. Okay, so that's quite a statement, I guess. So I'm definitely going to ask your perspective. What do you think
Yeah.
Seth, do you agree with him? Do you not agree with him? What's your perspective?
Well, what's interesting is really now with in the last, like I said, few years that we've got generative AI. You can tap into standard AI large language models. However, I think what's going forward, what is going to be unique about partnering with a company like Globality is the proprietary data that we've put together and the master data that we've put together, right? So when I mentioned we started 8 years ago, let me tell you about some of the things that we're doing. One of the things that we did is we built a robust taxonomy, really a knowledge graph that continues to grow and learn today. And it ensures that every project interaction builds on category expertise, spin category expertise. So how did we do that? Well, the model was trained by people. We went out and we engaged and hired people that come from the specific spin categories that we wanted to train the model on. And so our AI was actually trained in the beginning by people, and then billions of dollars of transactions are happening across the platform, and so it continues to learn now at scale. So the amount of data is really remarkable when you think about it. I think in the first week of this year, we had over $1 billion sourced on our AI. So that AI is as smart as every other person who's ever sourced on it, and every other project, and every other supplier that's been matched. And it just continues to learn. And so, you start to reimagine the reimagination really of sourcing, being from project by project to having this overall knowledge, every sourcing event that's ever been on the platform. And that's where AI plays this unique capability that not any one human could do. In the traditional way, there would be knowledge gaps when talent's at capacity, even where they wouldn't be able to have the kind of knowledge in this future way where knowledge is retained and continues to build and supports the business 24/7, 365 days per year. And this institutional knowledge is retained forever. That's the data.
Yeah, so very interesting. So I'm gonna peel some layers there, I guess, and I'm trying to follow the story, from the BT perspective. I definitely want some more details, and I don't know how deeply you were involved with the project and how confidential the information is. We completely respect that sometimes you might not be able to share these details, right? But from my perspective, let's say if we dig into the backstory or use case or the problem statement, obviously we are seeing a lot of different platforms in the market that are trying to do similar things. But in my mind, when I look at the AI use case for any of the sourcing scenarios, each category is going to be very, 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 very different. And let's say if I create a model for all of the categories, then that's probably not going to be as effective because every category is going to have its own nuances. So initially, when you mentioned the BT story, so in my mind, that is more of the service side story. And when you mentioned indirect spend, indirect spend is going to be more applicable in slightly more service-centric industries, not product-centric industries. And when I say product-centric industries, those are going to be your manufacturing, distribution, retail, etc. And they are going to have a lot more direct spend than your indirect spend. So are you guys focusing more on the indirect spend? But you also mentioned that you guys do the project-based sourcing. So that's a different beast. So maybe provide some more layers there in terms of what is the core focus, where the model is going to be really effective, or can you guys do all?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Sam. I want to answer that just by a little bit of context setting. A few years back, we had not only BT, but a number of peers of BT come together and do a study that FT sponsored, Financial Times, and it was a series of roundtables. BlackRock was involved, Accenture, SAP, Bayer, Roche, to just give you a sense. And they really were looking at, what is the manifesto of where we're going with sourcing and where are we going with procurement? And there were 5 guiding principles that came out of that. I mean, one of them was just turning spend into an asset. Procurement literally exists, Sam, if you think about it, to turn corporate spend into an asset for driving value for customers, shareholders, employees, stakeholders. And so how are they going to do that? And that came down to empowering the business user. internal business partners in R&D, HR, supply chain, logistics, IT, marketing, finance, legal. They should all be empowered to move swiftly, grow, and innovate. And procurement should facilitate, not hamper their ability to act independently, right? So out of that, this ability to kind of redefine how value is measured is really important. So what's the value scorecard to redefine to that vision, right? Is it cost savings? And absolutely, right? Is it speed? Yes, absolutely. That was, it's these extreme levels of speed that you can move at that really is what BT and others are seeing. If I give you another story, I'll talk to you a little bit about a couple of other customers. We have customers like Fidelity, who talk about really looked at their all of the agreements that they had to negotiate, all the master agreements that are in place, all of the on an annual basis what was going to renew, and they kind of sized a human model around what was going to be able to deliver cost and cost takeout, quality. In those relationships with those vendors, those are very important, but also quality in the relationships with their internal stakeholders. And they spoke to external organizations and tried to figure out that people model. And when they decided to bring in Glow and Globality, what they've said publicly is that if they were going to do that with all people, they would have had to deploy 50 more people to do what they do today on Globality, to give you a sense of the impact of AI. And if you think about the speed piece I was just talking about, so that's the efficiency piece, right? Efficiency in terms of people. And if you think about the speed piece of it, they said to make a decision in the old model took about 120 days. Today it takes 35 days. So they get to kind of get their cake and eat it too with savings, speed, and cycle time. Let me tell you about savings, because this is, I think, where the rubber meets the road. When they put options for procurement through a competitive sourcing process with us, what they found is that even when they source, let's say, a services contract where they already had an agreement in place and they already had rates, a rate card established. Yeah. Even when they were working with established vendors, established rate cards, as they put each event through a competitive environment, they were finding 10 to 20% savings over their already negotiated price. So that's how they're driving, this procurement assisted, empowering savings. So you asked a good question, which is, what kind of areas do we have an impact in, and where is AI having impact? Like, for example, what categories? And I mentioned there are over 7,000 categories in our knowledge graph, with a whole taxonomy of where we have an impact. So the simple answer, though, Sam, I want to just say really clearly, it's all spend. Yeah. It's indirect, it's direct, it's in each line of business. It is certainly in services that we've talked about, but it's in goods. There is a huge value proposition around autonomously sourcing anything and triaging all spend. There are built-in journeys for 100% of the spectrum of sourcing scenarios, from big strategic $10 million plus type projects to even that touchless sourcing that really minimizes human intervention altogether and is just driven off of category rules and workflows and approvals for even your smaller, more tactical spend, where you don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but what you want to do is just drive speed and efficiency. So, when you start looking across all spend like that, Glow, the AI agent, gets exponentially smarter and becomes this trusted AI agent that grows in intelligence, which is in line with the exponential growth of AI across the enterprise, right? So we're driving this personalized assistant that provides reliable, valuable insights to end users and stakeholders as they engage in their specific journey across any type of spend.
Okay, amazing. So we have one of the questions coming from the audience. We definitely want to hit on that. So this is coming from Tony. He's saying that in a complex project environment with multiple solutions being sourced into an integrated solution, how would the AI assist in execution and integration of components of the project? So I think this is related to the project-based sourcing, and that's what he's trying to hit on. So I don't know if you're going to have any sort of perspective there, Seth.
Yeah. I mean, the complex scenarios are really amazing in the sense that you drive really tangible value. So let's talk through it a couple pieces of that.
Yeah.
Number one, what our customers tell us is one of the outcomes besides the cost savings that they see is that the suppliers themselves get get a really AI assisted great experience in putting their information into this process, into this RFP process. So when the suppliers themselves can do that in a more informed way with a better scope, one of the things that we see is a narrower set of replies where you actually tighten the specifications and get more precise in the response. So one of the big outcomes in complex types of sourcing events is that before before globality, they used to see that there was a wide variety of responses, which made it very difficult for a human to make a decision.
Yeah.
So because if you have this wide variety of responses, now you're going to get into potentially giving more information out and trying to solve problems to get things lined up apples to apple. What our whole process ended up doing was, as our customers measured it, is the responses were more precise, which allowed decision making to happen quicker. So this AI-based smart and dynamic scoping gives not only like better scope as you go out to suppliers, but it gave more precise responses from suppliers. So those are just one example of the outcomes in a more complex environment. The other thing is that we drive competitive bids among large suppliers, and in those competitive bids, what often would happen is the responses would come back, and you would get in more complex environment, you would get, let's say, we've all seen this, right? You get the RFP that's like 100 pages long. And then you would have to hire a whole set of people that just go through it, build all the spreadsheets out to try to put it apples by apple. Well, our AI does that. The AI reads all the responses. It puts a whole list of anomalies or outstanding issues that you should look into, exceptions, things where they is not compliant with policy. So you can look directly into those and dig into those things right away. And then what the AI does, what Glow does is it does analytics on each of the responses. And so it puts pricing side by side. It puts rate cards side by side. It looks for anomalies in pricing. It looks for when has one project timeline gone longer, so there's additional costs there that you might not understand even though the rate is lower, right? So it makes sure that everybody can see when someone's done a discount versus when someone's done a credit back at the end of a project, when there's risk-based pricing. And so it puts all of those things together, and you can just make decisions now. And that's really what we want from our systems, isn't it? If we think about what do we want from analytics, what do we want from operational systems like this? Well, what you want is you want the humans to be able to work on the high value work of negotiating the final deal, and you want AI to take all of the tasks away, so it saves time and drives efficiency and savings. And so what this really turns you into is you're dealing with the anomalies, you're dealing with the exceptions, and you become the person that can go in and triage the exceptions.
Okay, so very interesting. And Tony, I don't know if that answers your question. We would love to hear the follow-up. If you have anything or if you agree, disagree, please comment. We would love to hear your perspective. I'm going to have one follow-up question for you, Seth, on this question. And that is going to be one of the things that you mentioned is the benchmarking of rates. And you also mentioned that you have the proprietary data, and I don't know whether this is allowed or not, to be completely honest, because obviously there are data rules as well in terms of what you can do with data and what you cannot do with data. But are you allowed to do the benchmarking among your customers? So, for example, you mentioned that you guys have what now, $1 billion spent on your platform. So if you have that, then you are going to have a lot of transactions, and you are going to have rates of each of the, let's say if somebody is sourcing for a skill set, indirect sourcing is probably going to be an example for that. So are you able to, let's say, confidently forecast or benchmark what is going to be rate of a skill? And can you tell if somebody is putting higher, lower? Can you do that? Any follow-ups there by any chance, Seth?
Yeah. No, I appreciate the question. And first of all, just to clarify, I mentioned that in the first week of 2024, $1 billion of spend was put on the platform. In 1 week alone, there's tens of billions of dollars that are on the platform. And by the way, that $1 billion represented all kinds of goods, direct materials, indirect, those kinds of things. We have multiple customers that put over $6 billion of their own spend on the platform just from the one enterprise.
Yeah.
And to answer your question, you think about spend by category.
Yeah.
So, if there's telco and network, there's IT, there's professional services, there's property and facilities, consumables, marketing, legal. So you start looking at all these different categories. And of course, we, like I mentioned, 8 years of expertise into that, into those categories. And then you have all the transactions now happening that it's learning from. So as you can imagine, where this thing goes in the future, Sam, is becomes an incredible benchmarking opportunity for some insights around where you should plan your year. You start to think about it as a chief procurement officer. Put yourself in the shoes of chief procurement officer, and you're maybe reporting to the chief financial officer, and the chief financial officer puts out some targets. We want a 6% reduction in spend, for example. We maybe need some headcount. We have to make some hard choices around headcount reduction versus capital expenditures versus operating expenses, and they're trying to make different decisions around how to get to their targets this year. Well, what this will eventually, if you think about it, you project forward what this kind of AI does for an organization, a learning AI that's learning from your spend in your organization, is with your suppliers. It gives you the ability to look across all of your spend, again, tens of thousands of suppliers, billions of dollars, and say, okay, where do we have some opportunities for improvement this year? What are things that we where can we introduce competition and create this market dynamic to drive down prices? For example, where could we take areas where we spread our spend across many different vendors, and where could we offer that volume in a live opportunity for multiple vendors to bid on it, and they pick up more volume of our business, and then we get better pricing. So it's a win-win, right? So this is about creating relationships where your strategic suppliers are more aligned to driving to your outcomes that you're trying to achieve for your CFO.
Yeah, very interesting. So we have one more comment. I think we should be able to cover that depending upon how much time you're going to take. But the comment is how AI do keyword research on synonyms. Like if a solution engineer cloud is their title instead of solution engineer, he put software developer cloud in their resume, then AI will be able to show that in the result while autonomous sourcing the data. That's very interesting question. So initially I was thinking that it's probably not related to autonomous sourcing, but it could be related. Let's say if this is going to be either a staffing company or even BT could utilize, they source these skill sets as well. So I don't know if you're going to have any sort of perspective. Is it relevant?
I think what it's a great question. It's talking about, we spent a much of this time talking about goods and services. We didn't talk as much about sourcing services specifically to individual people.
Yeah.
But it's an absolutely an appropriate topic. Remember, what AI is enabling here is an AI agent. It's enabling this effective decision making, right? And so that comes to big projects that are very complex, and it could come all the way down to sourcing an individual. So what and what are we doing? We are creating user collaboration within the platform to scope requirements, to evaluate proposals, to award the work with post-project feedback on supplier performance, and using AI to leverage that information to make decision-making on future sourcing needs. So I say all of that to kind of set the context to the answer, which is, staffing potentially, as we hear a lot about, like, for example, companies saying, oh, we're going to, we hear these announcements every day. We're laying off 5% of our workers. Well, the work doesn't go away. So maybe there's some efficiency that is helping in that case that we can help drive as well. But there's oftentimes work is moving to different kinds of contingent workforce. And staffing often is seasonally, many companies will seasonally move up their staffing and then move down and want to onboard and offboard very quickly. So another thing that our platform is used for is not only staffing large services organizations for projects, it's also just individual staffing of people to staff up and down. And here's, I'm going to talk to you about, talking about generative AI now. If you can scope your requirement for that individual work really fast, and you can evaluate people's resumes very efficiently through natural language processing, where you read about their response to your scope, and then you can award the work very efficiently, and it auto generates it. A magic button, we called it earlier.
Yep.
The magic button creates a statement of work, which is what? It's the level of accountability for the work that individual is going to do. Why wouldn't you send all of your staffing needs through that? And if you can do that in a few minutes using an AI agent. So Glow absolutely is doing that for some of the largest organizations in the world, where they used to just go staffing and have no accountability for it, just bring in people just based on their maybe their resume or their title and a rate. Well, now we've moved that kind of work to an SOW delivered staff, which is a contingent labor force that you can onboard easily and offboard easily when appropriate, but have a statement of work which creates accountability to the outcome that they're delivering, generated by Glow, our AI agent.
Yeah, so very interesting. So we have one more question. I think let's cover that. We have some more time. So can the AI predict price changes based on historical data in combination with current data, inflation, war, etc., as parameters? And I don't know if this falls in your responsibility or this is slightly outside. So maybe touch on that slightly.
Yeah, well, it's a great question because you start thinking about all the things that this kind of AI can do for you, and the should be price based on is there some risk that the prices could go up in the future, and those kinds of things. They're the right questions. I mean, Glow dynamically asks the right questions for scoping. So I want to let's not forget that scoping the right requirements helps you spend the right amount of money. When you think about what's my should be price, if you have a very narrow scope, and it creates a sourcing journey based on that scope, it allows you to make sure you're buying the right thing at the right price at the right time, and all of that. Now, the question really more is about, can I use historical data to forecast future pricing? And what we see our customers do is, I talked about Fidelity earlier. They have 90% of the spend running through Globality. Let's just say that with more data on your spend, you're a better negotiator. Let's just say with more events happening that are competitive, you get better pricing. And the best way to get the market price for right now is put it out to bid in a frictionless way with an AI agent and get the responses. There's a lot of thought around what should the price be, and what would be my benchmark, and what have other companies of our size spent for this similar thing. Well, all of that really just comes down to a moment in time where can you quickly produce responses from qualified, vetted suppliers and give you the price right now. The market price today is those responses. So there's an element of speed here that starts to become like we create our own benchmarks in real time. And the benchmarks are at the moment of the sourcing event. And there's one other thing I want to say about that on the benchmark piece, if you allow me, Sam, is that there's this other aspect we haven't talked so much about yet, which is doing the right thing, working with vendors that are aligned to your values as an organization. And so we see organizations, have their ESG goals, and they want to comply with those. When we do the matching algorithm on the AI, you can start to build in those rules. For example, we have a customer that says 50% of the time, if a diverse, a small, a local supplier is matched, a minimum of 50% of the time, they have to then be given the ability to bid on the project, which is just creating this environment where those vendors are able to go competitively win more business. So you can start to build in those kinds of rules that says, let's make sure we're doing business the right way as well.
Okay, very interesting. So we are close to our time now. This is going to be a time for any sort of closing advice or any resource that you want to share with our audience, or if you are going to have any sort of information where people can find you, you can share that. Seth.
Oh yeah, that's great. So again, you can find me at globality.com. You can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. We would love talking to customers about where they're going on their AI journey. The amount of response to this particular product and saying, is spend actually the first place to start with AI, because it's enterprise-wide by definition. And so when you take the dollar that's being spent, it cuts across every single stakeholder, line of business, and leader in your organization. This is a great way to introduce AI to the organization. And it's the first step to an enterprise AI because it is so transformational. I would just leave you with what's important to us is also what's important to the office of CFO. It's the financial health of your organization. It's certainly liquidity, cash flow, scenario planning around spend. It's workforce balance. It's what work are we going to do in the future with machines? What work are we going to use the talent for in the future? And the workforce planning and the talent strategy around that. There's new ways of working, and the mundane work or the work that is AI can do because it's always learning and it can have an impact at scale will be done by AI and automation. And the really important talent organization will deal with the exceptions and make the big decisions that require human intervention. Certainly, we're all about optimizing procurement strategies and maximizing those supplier relationships. That means things like, to the CFO, that are important: mitigating inflation, reducing risk, and increase sustainability and ESG. But ultimately, drive costs out, improve margins, and that comes from your resiliency of your spend and better forecasting, end-to-end visibility. You're really reducing operational risk when you're working with us on autonomous sourcing. And Globality is the leader in autonomous sourcing, and we would love to partner with you.
Okay, amazing insights. And time flies when you are talking to experts who really know what they are talking about. So thank you so much, Seth, once again for your time. Just to wrap, this was the podcast episode. It is going to be available in the audio form. You can listen on any of the podcasting platform. Like and subscribe on YouTube. It is also available on YouTube. And we are going to come back with another episode most likely next week. Every week we are going to be doing these either Thursdays or Fridays. So stay tuned for more episodes. On that note, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in this afternoon.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.